Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Corey Anderson of Tory slander, son. Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast. We're coming at you on Wednesday, the 9th of... Oh, it says 9/11 on my computer. Oh, other way around, because I'm British, and I'm the rest of the world. It's 11/9 in America. We got some stuff to talk about. Pleasantly surprising, because last week's episode was subtitled Between Two Skid Marks, because of the quality of the two events that we were between. This weekend, we're leading into a pretty good pay-per-view with a pretty good matchup at the top of it. I suppose I should probably touch on the stuff that happened on the last week's UFC card, but it was fine. That's all you need to know. Content was required by ESPN. The UFC provided 24 fighters and 12 fights or whatever it was. And they were all right. There were some finishes. Some Contender Series people got paid 10 and 10 or just 10. And Marina Rodriguez showed that she, despite training full-time as a professional MMA fighter for several years, and being the number 3 in the world in her division, still cannot grapple for love nor money. If you ever see someone get taken down into half guard and they start trying to Ezekiel their opponent from the bottom, with the one exception of Alexei Oleinik, they don't know what they're doing. Because it's one of those techniques where you are giving the opponent all the inside space to attempt it. You're opening up your elbows, you're letting them get underhooks, you're letting them pull themselves in close to you. And yet she did. And the other downright hilarious thing about that card was Nurdan BK, the Chinese lad, took on Darrick Minner. Darrick Minner threw a kick, busted his knee, fell down. Stoppage came quickly after. We went, oh no, another injury in this year of injuries. Year of the blown out knee. Comes out immediately afterwards that it's just before the fight there was the largest move at the betting line in like UFC history to bet against Minner. And this is all just so funny because he was training with Krause. And this comes weeks after, not even weeks, it's probably like 2 weeks. It's like a fortnight after the UFC banned their athletes and coaches from betting because of James Krause. This dude just can't stop himself. So that's all being investigated. You know, no slander on Krause there. You know, it could be completely unrelated to him. But if you make betting a huge part of your personality while also training, journeyman MMA fighters, people are going to start getting suspicious. But I said on Twitter, I think James Krause is the funniest man in MMA. Because he was objectively a pretty good fighter. And he's objectively a pretty good coach. But he still can't stop tripping over his own dick in various stuff that you should definitely read the forums for and not ask me about. But anyway, maybe we'll go back to that card later. But the main thing I want to talk about today, obviously, is Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. And this is one of those fights that I would have killed for 5 to 10 years ago when I was writing and I didn't feel confident writing about grappling, and I certainly wasn't any good at analysing wrestling or grappling. Because it's two kickboxers who have a wide range of kickboxing fights to watch, who have done all their work in MMA with kickboxing, and who have 2 previous kickboxing matches against each other. Trying to think of other occasions when this has happened in MMA. Certainly not for a title in the UFC at any point. But before we even get going, I have written 2 large articles in the Advanced Striking 2.0 study series. A month and a bit ago, I wrote Advanced Striking 2.0 Alex Pereira. Yesterday, I published Advanced Striking 2.0 Israel Adesanya. If you are a Patreon boy, go and read them. If you're a Patreon boy who doesn't like reading, go and click the play button, listen to them, and look at the diagrams. If you aren't a Patreon boy, consider becoming a Patreon boy, because I'm going to reference things or just brush over things and be like, oh, well, that's in the articles during this podcast. So well worth your time to go and sign up, read all the articles in 1 week, and then leave. Because if you're anything like me, you're cheap. But yes, Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. What a strange fight. It's made stranger because, as multiple people have pointed out in this week, has anyone ever got a title fight this quickly after transitioning over from kickboxing or whatever? This is Alex Pereira's 7th fight, 6th. He's got 6 wins, 1 loss. The 1 loss was years ago, but it was very abrupt. He left Glory as Oh no, he just lost his second title. So he'd been their double champ, just lost their second title, left Glory with the stated intention of going to the UFC. That was what Glory were all saying on their own broadcast. Very weird situation because it was basically Glory admitting, like, we don't have the money to keep this guy interested. But he came in straight to the UFC, which was a great decision on his part, going to the UFC rather than going through the Contender Series, because on the Contender Series, at this point, he would still be fighting for 10-10. I always say Jack Della Maddalena, one of my boys. He's a boy of the podcast. He's a boy of Jack Slack. He's one of my faves. But they got the best prospect in Australia for 10-10. He's had 3 fights in the UFC now. He's one knockout of the night in like 2 of them, but he's still on 10-10. That's an incredible steal for the UFC. If you can go straight into the UFC and skip the mandatory 10-10 through the Contender Series, you're probably doing well. However, a lot of these guys who go straight into the UFC from Brazil are managed by Valid Ismail, who famously gets them shit deals. But anyway, fights Michailidis in his first UFC fight, gets held against the fence for the entirety of the first round. I said, so he's going to be a flying knee at the start of the round and then try and survive type fighter. Comes out second round, immediately wins by flying knee. Very funny stuff. Fights Bruno Silva, who again is mainly a striker, but actually did a decent job standing with Pereira. Pereira really ran away with it in the third when he started hurting him, but really good performance out of Bruno Silva in that fight. And he fights Sean Strickland, and this is the reason that he's done so well, basically. So I think it was It's Not Cage Fighting, who also has a YouTube channel. He was saying, like, what was it that made his run go better than Gokhan Saki's? And I said Sean Strickland achieved a ranking, because Sean Strickland achieved a ranking by awkwardly striking in a way that was pretty janky and ugly and had a lot of flaws in it. I mean, if you watch Sean Strickland's good performances where he won, quote unquote good, against Uriah Hall and things like that, but his whole fight style is to walk up to the dude, sometimes stand on one leg and sort of poke a teep with his lead leg, and sometimes reach with his right hand right out in front of him to catch their jab as he throws his own jab. And if your right hand, if you're an orthodox fighter and your right hand is always out ahead of you, reaching for the opponent's jab, very easy for them to hit you with the left hook, which of course is Alex Pereira's best technique. So he body jabbed him like 3 times and then hooked him in the head, and it was beautiful knockout. Obviously, Strickland should have been trying to wrestle at some point, but his striking style was tailor-made for Alex Pereira. The best left hook in kickboxing history versus some guy whose right hand is always down by his nipples. Slurp of tea. I'm on the T2 Melbourne breakfast again today. It's pretty good. So yeah, that's all he's done. Not an awful lot in MMA terms. Basically only 3 fights in this run. He had 3 fights way back in the day. And he's fighting Israel Adesanya, who is genuinely very, very accomplished in MMA. Now, the intrigue of it is, of course, that Israel Adesanya doesn't aggressively wrestle a lot of the time. You'll see moments of it. He took down Gastelum, I believe. He'll like reverse takedowns and get top position and just, win grappling exchanges that way. But he very rarely forces grappling on other people. It would be very unusual for him to come out in this fight. And even if we think that Alex Pereira's weakness is probably his grappling, for him to try and put the grappling on Pereira. Now, if you're Israel Adesanya, probably don't believe you need to, because if you've seen their previous 2 fights, the first one was, people overuse the word robbery, but it's one of those ones that I would consider a bit of a robbery. I don't know what the Chinese judges were looking at in that first fight that they gave it to Pereira. Second fight, Israel Adesanya was doing the same thing, and Pereira just sort of got him, like just sort of swung for the fences and caught him. You can come at it any way you want and be like, well, he set it up, and he didn't. He lunged in with an overhand that took him way out of his stance, and he came up with a left hook after looking at the floor off the overhand. So it was obviously not a lucky punch, but he was... there weren't a lot of signs in that fight that he had worked out what Israel Adesanya was doing in the first fight that gave him so much trouble. Now, my plan was to do a Filthy Casuals guide to the kickboxing rivalry between these 2 guys, but I ran out of time. But if you want to watch those fights again, they're on YouTube. They're very good. One of the other things that I love about guys who have kickboxing careers coming to MMA, Overeem was the other notable one. And obviously when Saki was making his little attempt at it and things, but when they do come over, there's a lot of, or what I used to love was that there's a lot of free footage out there of them that isn't going to be copyright claimed. So I was really looking forward to making that video, but like I said, I overran writing the advanced striking pieces. But in that first fight, a lot of what gives Alex Pereira trouble is that Israel Adesanya is presenting himself as an orthodox fighter for most of the fight, but all his best shots are coming in as a southpaw. And he's doing that by throwing a left kick, a step-up left kick to the lead leg or to the head, and then stepping back into southpaw. And Pereira will chase him back off the kick and then run onto a southpaw left straight or a southpaw left knee, or if he stands still, a southpaw left front kick to the body. That's a big one in Israel Adesanya's arsenal. Step up left kick, step back. If they don't chase you, big left front kick. Because that was that would have been a teep originally. If you were in an orthodox stance, that's a little needling poke with the lead leg. If you put it down behind you, you can now stomp on their guts from, throwing from behind your center of gravity. And that's how he sets up a lot of those question mark kicks. Again, this is all in the article, go read that. But that was giving Pereira a lot of problems. The other thing that was giving Pereira a lot of problems is that Israel Adesanya does a lot of framing and leverage guarding. Or sometimes long guard, I suppose, in Muay Thai context. But anytime you put your arms out straight, whether you're touching the opponent with your hands or you're reaching over their shoulders, if you've got your shoulders up, you're basically in a shoulder roll, but you've also got these big long noodles out the front of your arm, out the front of your guard that are pushing and getting in the way of the opponent. That's framing, and that's what Israel Adesanya does really well. And it was an interesting matchup technically because Pereira does a lot of shoulder rolling with his hands in off his punches. So if you watch him, he loves the body jab in kickboxing, and he body jabs and then he rolls down behind his lead shoulder and comes back with punches if they punch at him. But he also body jabbed and then he'd shoulder roll and they'd just kick him in the leg and he'd be sideways and they'd get this free kick off for very little on his end. But yeah, it's really interesting, the two styles, because both of them are getting down behind their shoulders, which is hugely important, I believe, in coming to MMA. Kickboxing does not encourage you to get down behind your shoulders. Kickboxing encourages you to put up your guard and just take it on the earmuffs, basically. I always say, there's nothing that makes you fight like that in kickboxing, but it is sort of I don't want to say meta, but it's the tradition in kickboxing. Like, the worst possible guy for an MMA striker to imitate from kickboxing would be someone like Robin van Roosmalen, who is basically, his fighting style is Dutch drilling, but at 100% intensity. So they throw a combination against his guard, he throws a combination back at them the moment they've finished. No movement, no fancy footwork, no evading their blows. He's just taking them on his guard and throwing back. The guys to copy from kickboxing would be people like Giorgio Petrosian. Makes use of a ton of footwork and movement and in and out movement and pushing of the opponent. He's either always got his hands on the opponent, moving them around, or he's moving around them. Very rarely just covering up. And Adesanya is another one because he had this success in kickboxing while sort of gearing his style towards being an MMA fighter. He was pursuing the two careers at the same time for a long time. And, you can watch him in kickboxing and he's fighting good guys in his division. Verlinden, Pereira, others who I cannot remember off the top of my head, but not bad fighters, Wilness. And he's jabbing them up. And the jab barely exists in kickboxing. And he's doing it from hands low. And the way he's getting away with it is by doing tons of feinting and tons of movement. There's nothing to make you do that as a kickboxer. But if you teach yourself to do that and do it religiously through the rounds, you can give people a really hard time. Also, from very early on, he was using clinches and framing. Because if you can decide when you're clinching and then decide to stop the opponent when they want to clinch you, you have a real edge when things get tough. Because when people start to get tired, they want to fall into clinches, and if you don't let them on their turn, and you frame off them and you hit them, or you frame off them, circle around them, and threaten to hit them, that's even more tired that's even more tiring for them. Whereas if you are able to pull them into clinches whenever you want, you can stop them when they get going. You can take breathers when you want to. So that was always an important part of Israel Adesanya's game as well. Which is an interesting contrast to Pereira because he always had a lot of trouble with people tying him up. And also, because he went after the knockout hard from round one, and he really did pressure people, and had lovely combinations in kickboxing too, but because he went after people so hard from round one, you'd get to round 3 of a 3-round fight, and these are 3-minute rounds, and he'd look rubbish in round 3 compared to round 1. The Advanced Striking 2.0 that I wrote about Alex Pereira a couple of months ago is a bit of a departure from what the series normally is, because I sat down and I tried to after examining his style, I tried to put together or group tendencies of people who had beaten him and how they had beaten him or given him a hard time. So it was quite interesting because there was Adesanya and Yusri Belgawi, both of them very long, tall guys, or as long and well, Belgawi was taller, but long, tall guys when Pereira is so used to fighting much shorter opponents, and that gave him a lot of trouble. Both of them switch hit throughout the fight, and that also really confused Pereira a lot of the time. And then on the other end, you had Wilnis and Vakatov, who both had great success by pressuring Pereira. Both of them did well in the first fight, Wilnis he did the Van Roosmalen. He just took blows on his gloves because Pereira was basically just a boxer at that time. Pereira would get close enough to punch, and the moment that he was done with his combination on Wilnis's gloves, Wilnis would hammer a low kick in and catch him out of position. And it gets to this weird point where Pereira's standing in range but doesn't want to punch, so he's sort of half-heartedly punching, and then Wilnis is still coming back with low kicks, and finally Wilnis just hits him with a left hook to the body and takes him out of action. But in their second fight, Wilnis corners him really early and knocks him down, and every time that he's able to push Pereira back to the edge of the ring, to the corner, it takes away a lot of what Pereira does, because what Pereira is really good at, he has one of the best left hooks in MMA. We talked about this in the article. The left hooks going forward are less pure punches than left hooks going back, or when the weight's going back, because your weight has to go from your left foot to your right foot, which is also your front foot to your back foot. So if you watch a really beautiful left hook like Sugar Ray Robinson versus Gene Fulmer, he's going backwards when he's punching, when he lands it. And that's the same with a lot of Pereira's stuff. He throws like a hard right low kick, naked, to get guys to come in on him. And as his right foot goes back, he throws his weight onto it and he throws the left hook and he catches them coming forward. And throughout all his fights, he's been very good at just like putting the pressure on, taking a step back and hitting them with the left hook as they come forward. And he can't do that when you move him to the edge of the ring because it's so tied to how his feet are moving. If you put him against the ropes, he can't step back and lengthen his stance and left hook you there. If his feet and hips are fairly square against the fence or the ropes, he doesn't have a lot of hitting power. So Vakatov also did that, and he did that by getting straight into Pereira's chest. He just walked into him and body jabbed him as Pereira stepped backwards. And then he'd throw an overhand across the top when they reached the ropes, rather. But yeah, I mean, that's all in that article. It's well worth reading, but it's interesting because Pereira, he does so well pressuring opponents and then releasing the pressure just for a second, or they try and fight out of this fog of pressure that he's putting on them. And as they come out, he hits them with the perfect counter. He has a lot harder time when guys get on him from the get-go and just push him back. In kickboxing, that is. But Bruno Silva gave a good account of himself just by going after Pereira, not being scared of him. Now there's a limit to that, because obviously if you go forward and not scared of him and your right hand is down by your nipples all the time, Sean Strickland, that doesn't work either. That's just giving him a free shot. But Adesanya is more in the Yusri Belgawi mold, the circling around, using length, switching stances, throwing lots of kicks, and then hitting him 1-2s and things like that when he's busy worrying about the kicks. And of course, the thing about both Belgawi and Israel Adesanya is that in Belgawi's second and third fights with Pereira, Belgawi won the first, lost the second and the third, and in Israel Adesanya's second fight with Pereira, he didn't look much better. He didn't look like he'd worked them out. He just caught him. And that's a completely legitimate way to win, just being able to catch people with one big punch. It's awesome and sort of magical, but it's not always the most encouraging, because at some point it might not work, and then you've just got 3 rounds in a kickboxing match, 5 rounds, whatever it is, of not being able to work this guy out. But that's a lot about Pereira. Let's talk a little bit about Israel Adesanya. Where's he been? What's he done lately? He's on a little bit of a, certainly I still enjoy him, but certainly as a avid follower of the sport, someone who's keeps up with this shit, you do notice that fans have turned on him a little bit, because he's had aside from Paulo Costa, he hasn't scored a finish since he won the title from Robert Whittaker. He had that close fight with Robert Whittaker in his second to last. But aside from Robert Whittaker, it doesn't look like there's anyone who's really offering him much of a challenge. And that is part of why this fight has come together. because we were almost at a Sean Strickland title shot, which would be desperate. But since winning the title, he had that very tedious fight with Yoel Romero, which is as much Romero's fault as Israel Adesanya's, because Romero has this thing where he doesn't want to spend any energy, and then never really used the energy that he seemed to be saving in the 4th and 5th round. Had the fight against Paulo Costa, scored the stoppage. Really impressive performance. Paulo Costa, some interesting facets of his game, but largely just a big meathead. Really completely lost when he dealt with someone with actual ring craft. Jan Blachowicz beat him by being weird, by parrying all his straight punches and opening himself up for head kicks and not really taking them. Really impressive performance from Jan, and obviously takedowns played a big role in that. Him being a 205-pound man when he's absolutely dehydrated like a raisin meant that he was a lot stronger than Israel Adesanya. And of course, he is a very good grappler and wrestler anyway. And Marvin Vettori tried to, wrestle with Adesanya for 25 minutes back down at middleweight. Couldn't do shit with it. One of the most frustrating fights, because the lesson that he took away from his first fight, where he was able to get Adesanya off his feet by double jabbing him back to the cage. The interesting part was the double jabbing him back, moving him to the cage, making him move. He's going to move because that's what he does. He's got good ring craft. So you've got to try and make him move into the places you want him by showing him double jabs, by lifting up your leg as if you're going to kick and then putting it down in front of you. Like Mario Batista was doing to that poor lad the other night. But him and Rafael Cordeiro were just keep going for the double leg along the cage and just lean on him. And he got fucking nothing done. It was a very bad game plan, is all I'm saying. And then most recently, Jared Cannonier, a fight where not a lot happened, to be honest. Is he just hammering in the calf kick and the odd right straight or left straight, depending on what stance he was on. But Jared Cannonier is getting title shots. That's where we got to. And obviously the UFC must be frustrated because Israel Adesanya seemed like he should be a star. They were building up to all that John Jones crossover fight stuff for a very long time. They let him take a fight in the second division, which they don't... they're kind of cautious about that now because the shine has sort of gone off the double champ thing. And they don't like people holding up two divisions because that's what happens. What you're going to do is you're going to drop the belt in the division below, and then you're going to fight in the upper division and probably lose fairly quickly because you're fighting upper division. Or they just make another belt for you like they did with Amanda Nunes. But they were really hoping that he'd be a big star. And I don't know about buy rates because no one knows about buy rates anymore. They aren't really reported. But you can see the fan base have sort of cooled on him a bit because he seemed like this knockout artist, and now he seems like a guy who is just going out and getting the job done in a nice, safe way. Which, if you're coaching or you're studying film, be like, yes, that's perfect. That's what you want to be doing, saving your brain and not taking too many risks. But if you're watching fighting to, watch fighting and enjoy it, it's not the most fan-friendly. So the matchup, things to watch out for. Adesanya using framing when Pereira gets close enough to punch. Adesanya circling out has always been a hugely important part of his game. A lot easier in a cage than it is in a square ring. Go read the Adesanya article, but we talked about how he circles out and how he's very good at switching stances while circling out. And then the wonderful thing about that is you either you can hit a guy with a counter shot that wasn't there before, if you switch from orthodox to southpaw while you're stepping back and then circling out, or you circle out, you both disengage, and then you come back in and you're on a different foot to what you were originally. The other guy's thinking about what he's doing. He has a moment where he's got to go fuck and catch up. Look out for the low kicks, the calf kick particularly from closed stance, calf kick and the jab from closed stance, body kick and high kick off the rear leg from open stance. Look for him to use the step up low kick to step back into a southpaw stance. Kicking to switch stances, that seemed to be a massive thing that annoyed Pereira in the first two fights in kickboxing. For Pereira, you want to look for him to corner Adesanya here, which is a task in itself and something that guys who were planning to fight him in the future should be training all the time. Cutting the cage, tricky thing to do, massively helped by double jabs and fake teeps or fake kicks and step through. I'm quite excited to see Pereira with holding and hitting with the collar tie and things like that. He's such a massive hitter that you'd think he could get some decent power from dirty boxing positions. His job largely is to try and get people to run on the left hook. When they don't do that, he tends to go after them with big booming overhands. Combination punching, he's always been a lot better against shorter fighters because he loves to throw like a 1-2, or he'll go jab and then right to the body and then come up with the left uppercut. The left uppercut is a huge part of his game against a lot of fighters that he's fought. So like Simon Marcus, Vakatov, people like that. He used to love throwing the left uppercut to keep them upright and then bomb them with overhands. Against fighters of the same height or taller than him, he can bomb them with the overhand because they're tall, but he doesn't have that threat to. Well, they don't often level change underneath him. He doesn't have that threat that if they try and step into his chest, he's going to tear their head back. But it does somewhat limit his combination punching. He doesn't do it nearly so well against taller opponents. Though it should be easier to get to the body, and he has a really great right straight to the body. Always the chance of a flying knee or a wheel kick or something like that, but I think that's a very low possibility, especially because Adesanya is so good at staying off the fence. Pereira's kicking game has always been interesting to me because he does really good work with naked low kicks to try and draw the opponent in for a counter hook. And he also does really good work with stepping knees. And you don't see a lot of those in MMA full stop. Maybe Overeem is a really good example. But stepping knees really fuck up a guy's day. If you watched Keita versus Allen the other day, one of the few things he did well was he convinced Allen that he was going to come in with an overhand and then he just stepped into a knee. Benil Dariush used to do this a lot too. Knees to the ribs are killers. And especially, this fight is so much longer than a kickboxing match. They fought 3 3-minute rounds the 2 times that they fought, or they were scheduled for 3 2-minute rounds. If it was a title fight in Glory, it'd be like 3 3-minute rounds. It would be like 5 3-minute rounds. Here it is 5 5-minute rounds. It's a massively long fight. So bodywork really to the advantage of anyone who uses it. I mean, that's one of the things that Izzy did well against him in the first fight. Didn't really change levels for body shots all that much, but he did throw a lot of front kicks off the open stance to the body. But anyway, I've gone on about that far too long. This is the thing, like, maybe Izzy does come out and immediately try and take him down, but I just can't see it. We all basically expect this to be a kickboxing match, but in a big cage. And in a big cage, you'd probably give the edge to Israel Adesanya because his ring craft is so good, and he's not just going to walk himself back onto the ropes. However, as I've said already, but Alex Pereira has been losing these fights against like Yusri Belgawi and Israel Adesanya even, and he's just bombed them out with one good, well-timed punch. And, that in itself is a skill. So don't put money on it, is what I'm saying. This is not the fight to bet on. But yeah, should be good. I'm really looking forward to this. If I sound a little bit burned out, it's because I've written 2 huge articles on these lads, which you can go and read. But yeah, their kickboxing matches are great fun, and they're free, and they're online, and you can watch them whenever you want. So give them a watch. They're high level. It was kind of like the old Max Holloway, Conor McGregor thing, or Mario Batista, Corey Sandhagen I'm doing now. But like fighters who, when they met, you were aware they were good, but you didn't think they'd get to like the top of 2 sports at the same time and then meet each other later for a world title. They were just 2 guys trying to make ends meet in China. Right, rest of this card. We got some weird matchmaking on here. There's some sort of predatory stuff going on with a couple of these fights. But co-main event is Zhang Weili versus Carla Esparza. We all remember how well, maybe we don't remember, but Carla Esparza won the title in an extremely tedious fight with Rose Namajunas, where Rose Namajunas seemed to just fuck herself again mentally. Esparza is a weird fighter because she is still so one-dimensional. All she has is the wrestling. And she's still enough of a threat with it that she can win a lot of fights. She can... they keep bringing her in like one-dimensional strikers like Rodriguez last weekend. I was like, Jesus. But Yan Xiaonan, fucking awful on the ground. The moment she hit the ground against Esparza, she's almost like arm-locking herself trying to buggy choke her. Trying to remember how to buggy choke. But Zhang's last fight was against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, knocked her out with a spinning back fist. The last one before that was a rematch with Namajunas. A lot of people felt she deserved the decision in that. I think I did think she deserved the decision and the title subsequently. But that second Rose Namajunas fight is a really good back and forth technical scrap. Rose Namajunas does that a lot. And that's why I was so disappointed by that Carla Esparza one, because I was like, Rose Namajunas normally surprises people in their first fight. And then in the second fight, she gets into these technical wars, with Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Zhang Weili. And then against Carla Esparza, she just shat the bed, just ran away the entire time. But that Rose Namajunas fight was really fun, the Zhang one, because they both showed some new looks on the feet. They both showed some really slick groundwork. Zhang using like deep half guard and shit against Namajunas, who's already very slick on the ground. And that's quite encouraging against Carla Esparza because you got to, like, you know, as much as people think that Zhang's just this unstoppable force, you've got to think at some point she's probably going to get bundled over if this fight goes any distance. Or at least end up in a clinch. And she's very strong in the clinch with knees and elbows, which is something that very few in this division are. But if she hits the mat, you know, you've got to be encouraged by the fact that she has some semblance of a guard game now. The work she's done on her wrestling, the work she did with Cejudo and stuff seems to really pay off. The game plan in that Namajunas fight was really good. She was waiting for Namajunas to lead and then counter low kicking, and it worked really well. Slowed her right down. But honestly, Zhang Weili looks like she's living her best life. She looks like she's living my ideal life. Just going around the world and training with great people at various disciplines and having fun, and everyone seems to love her. So, good for her. Hope she's got enough on the ground and in the clinch for Esparza here. You know, Esparza, I don't have a lot to say about her because I find her very boring, but she is grindy as hell and she will get people down. And she, you know, she's surviving on the feet. That's more than enough. You know, she ran onto some counters against Rose Namajunas and was fine. She was on the feet for extended periods against people like Claudia Gadelha and shit like that, and she was, again, fine. So Zhang is like a 3-1 favourite, which I think is unheard of for a title challenger, but I could see this not being the kind of steamrolling that people are expecting. I would still probably feel like Zhang, you know, she's just got more skills, and she's also very, very strong. You know, that was the thing you saw against Jessica Andrade, who her game is to just steamroll people. And she ran out, hit a brick wall against Zhang in the double collar tie clinch, got hit with like a couple of knees and an elbow, and sent home without a belt. Right, what else is on this card? Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. Great, love it. 2 glass cannon. Well, no, not glass cannons. I mean, Poirier gets cracked a lot, but comes back from it. Chandler gets cracked a lot and doesn't, typically. This is Michael Chandler going for another pitch for a world title shot without actually fighting any of the killers in that division. I mean, Dustin Poirier is a killer, but he's slowing down. You know, if I'm Michael Chandler, I don't want to be fighting like Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot. Thank you very much. But this is a fun fight. This is like when we said that there's a separate division at welterweight for old men. This is the separate division for sort of already stars. Poirier, Chandler, Gaethje, they could just go in a round robin. Actually, this completes that round robin, I suppose, but Chandler's going to somehow sell this or spin this into a title shot if he wins. He might even spin it into a title shot if he loses. Both guys, shifty, big bangers. Poirier, obviously, much more depth to his striking game. Michael Chandler has the right straight to the body and then the right overhand, and then the right overhand shifting left hook, and that is the lot. Dustin Poirier has a bit more going on with kicks. He's got a really good jab when he applies it. He's got that great shoulder roll, some nice counters off it. But really, a lot of what he does is the left straight, step through left jab, right overhand. He is a southpaw fighter who has done all his best work with an overhand right from orthodox. Wrestling-wise, pretty interested. Poirier's got good jiu-jitsu, but and decent wall walking. But Chandler is very good at making the fight boring on the mat. If you watch him when he's losing fights when he started losing to Tony Ferguson of all people, but even when he was in later rounds against like Goto Yamauchi and Brent Primus, he'll just take people down into closed guard and hold them along the fence and drop the odd elbow. That's how he keeps himself from gassing out hard. What else is good? Okay, Frankie Edgar versus Chris Gutierrez. This is when I feel like the UFC is just dropping the fucking ball, because Frankie Edgar said this is going to be his last fight. We could have had Frankie Edgar versus Dominic Cruz, and people have said like, but what if he needs to fight now? You're like, that would be a good fight. That would be a great headliner for like a fight night card where they actually go to a stadium and try. You know, there are so many people who would still want to see Frankie Edgar versus Dominic Cruz, and you could headline with it despite both of them being not top contenders in their division anymore. And if Frankie needs money, just give him $5,000 to sit on his hands for a couple of months and then do the Dominic Cruz fight. I don't get people who are like, well, Dominic Cruz just fought and Frankie Edgar needs to fight now. You're like, no, they don't. You could literally just pay him to sit aside for a little bit. It wouldn't be any extra effort. But they're giving him Chris Gutierrez, who's good and young. And you're like, well, what is this? Are you trying to get Frankie killed in his last fight? If he beats this guy, that's good, but it's not the same as like if he fought someone who, you know, there's some kind of like story to it, like the Dom Cruz fight that we never got. So it's fucking weird. But I like Gutierrez. If Frankie beats him, that's great. You know, that I'm sure Frankie still has the skills to maybe beat this guy, but it seems like old guy versus young guy matchup when you could do a really good, compelling old guy versus old guy matchup where neither man's likely to get hurt there badly. Dan Hooker versus Claudio Puelles, great fight. Dan Hooker back up at 155, thank God. Do not know what he was thinking going down to 145. Well, I do know what he was thinking. He lost a fight by wrestling, and he was like, well, maybe if I were fighting smaller dudes. And, Arnold Allen was just wicked fast. And it always does. There's questions about what happens to your chin when you cut a load of weight. There's questions about what happens to your cardio and shit like that. I mean, it was round one, so cardio doesn't really matter. But you do get guys go into the cage, and they're just zapped from round one from a bad weight cut. They'll say, like, I just wasn't moving explosively at all. He had a rough night out against Arnold Allen last time. Before that, Islam Makhachev. He was Islam Makhachev's first real name win. And now he's fighting Claudio Puelles, and I really like Puelles. He has got 3 knee bars in the UFC, which I think might be the record. Because Oleg Taktarov had a lot of knee bars, but I don't think they were all in the UFC. And then all the other knee bar guys are pancrase guys from back in the day when that was the only move they knew. To knee bar people repeatedly in the UFC is incredible. The knee bar is like non-existent in jiu-jitsu, except for from the full sweep nowadays, which is really nasty. If you want to watch someone just fuck people up with that, it's Diego Pato. He just, ruins people's knees. But against Guida and Grutzmacher, he hit them both from bottom half guard, like Craig Jones doing his leg entry. I think Felipe Silva, he got it from the top or something. But yeah, really fascinating guy because everything else he does is decisions. It's like decision, knee bar. He's got 2 things, going the distance and knee barring people. But he's not bad on the feet. I suspect Dan Hooker's a lot better. I mean, he's longer. He's got tons of feints. He's got a much slicker game on the outside. And Dan Hooker, not a terrible wrestler. He gave Nasrat Haqparast a horrible time on the feet and on the ground. He destroyed Mark Chikese on the ground before Mark Chikese put on the knee straps of doom for the audience. Everyone knows if he's got the knee straps on, you're like, oh, fuck, he's going to wrestle. Yeah, he's got a hard task here in Hooker. I think Hooker has losses, and it's kind of like Michael Chandler, where he's got losses, but they're to good guys. And you're going to see him against Claudio Puelles and be like, oh, wow, I hate this phrase, but there are levels to this. But if Puelles beats him, man, that's a great name on Puelles' record. Renato Moicano versus Brad Riddell. Fun. Moicano's sort of like a long, gangly, pokey striker with hard low kicks. Brad Riddell, a banger. Then you got another sort of predatory one, Ryan Spann versus Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes has had a horrible time of it lately. Ryan Spann has been knocking people out left, right, and centre, with the exception of Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker both beat him. But yeah, he's on a decent run for a light heavyweight. Whereas after losing that close fight to John Jones, which he probably won, Dominic Reyes has fought twice and just been violently knocked out in the last 2 years. We're also more than a year removed from his last fight, which is good chin-wise and recovery-wise. That's always what I want to see. People take breaks if they can. You can afford to take a break off a bad knockout, do. And, break, I don't mean like go on holiday, grow a beer gut. I mean like non-contact training as much as possible. Not grapple, hit pads, do things like that, but try and avoid the sparring. And then, when you're 3 months out from when you want to fight, like a year after coming back, then get to the sparring and things. But most people don't have that option, obviously. Look at Marlon Moraes. He kept coming back 5 months after getting knocked out. Gets knocked out even easier next time. And now he's retired, and then now he's going to PFL. So, bonkers. But we'll see. I mean, Dominic Reyes had some depth to his game. Ryan Spann is just sort of a big banger. Erin Blanchfield versus Molly McCann. People have seemed hot on Blanchfield. They seemed like, the UFC's decided that's the end of the Molly McCann train. I don't know. Do not care either. Petrosky versus Wellington Turman. Okay. Ottoman Zaita versus Matt Frivola. That's another sort of like, Frivola's the old guy there. Ottoman Zaita is 13-0, lots of knockouts. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is back. That's good. She won a fight at last the other day. Julio Arce is back. Sungwoo Choi. Yeah, it's an okay card, actually. Yeah. Really, that main event, Poirier versus Chandler, Hooker versus Puelles, Moicano versus Riddell. And if there's something interesting happens on the ground or there's a quick knockout in Zhang versus Esparza, that could be good too. But there's like 4 or 5 good fights on that card that I'm looking forward to. I suppose before we go, I better mention some good things from the card the other night. But I reckon that'll do us for today. If you want to get more of the shit that I've said, but with diagrams and clever stuff around it and more details on their lives and the styles they use, Check out the Advanced Striking 2.0 Alex Pereira and Advanced Striking 2.0 Israel Adesanya, which you can read at thefightprimer.com by becoming a Patreon boy. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And I've already said, if you want to see what I'm writing, anytimefightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, desperately hoping for some excitement on this card. Bless.